Welcome to the Gen AI podcast, where the future meets fun and tech talk trends. Get ready to dive into the world of artificial intelligence like never before. Your hosts, Dale, Alan, Greg, and Val, are about to take you on a wild ride through the AI universe. So, buckle up, tune in, and let the AI adventure begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gen AI podcast. The episodes keep rolling. Al keeps rolling. You here, Al? Hello, Al.
Yeah, we're on fire this year.
We are on fire. There's lots that's happened since the last episode. We do miss Greg. Greg sends his apologies. I think there was a mix-up in communication.
Correct.
And locations.
Yeah.
And as always, we don't know where Val is, but we know he's alive.
Well, we know where he is. We don't know why he's not coming to these, but yeah, he's in Australia.
We love you, Val.
Yeah. Peace.
Yeah.
Look after yourself.
You're welcome anytime. I think your name's on the pod, so please do join us at some stage.
Yeah. Season 3. That's the cliffhanger.
Exactly. But in other cliffhangers, there's so much that has happened, Al. And I don't know if you want to. I know you love a therapy session on these podcasts as well.
I'm going to try not to this time.
But there has been so much just within the past couple of weeks, right? All the releases that have come out from.
Yeah.
I saw your post on ChatGPT saying, was it 4.5, and then we're going to do 5, and then it's all.
I honestly, it's always sunny in Philadelphia with all the strings.
Yeah. So I think people are confused though with what I use.
I think Sam Altman's confused about naming.
Okay.
That's my theory here, because there's just too much.
Yeah.
Right.
It is too much, but then that's just within ChatGPT, right?
Because... Yeah, exactly. Right. Even just within that, I'm okay, I have a thing that I want to do. And it's should I use O3 Mini? Should I use O3 Mini High Thinking? Should I use O1 Pro, or should I just use 4.0 or 4.0 Mini? And I'm right?
Yeah.
Use O1 Pro all the time with deep research turned on.
Yeah.
Done.
Exactly. But then you get, the other thing, I was chatting to a colleague of mine, and it's interesting because Google's silently been doing their thing in the background. They haven't been making too much noise, but Gemini, we were just discussing before we'd record. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. They're not really being silent, but for some reason they don't make that much noise on the news cycle. They released Gemini Flash 2.0 with thinking, which is basically another reasoning model, but it's based on Gemini Flash, which is by far the fastest model out there and the cheapest. We're talking about, I was looking at this morning on API calls. I think Gemini Flash with reasoning is 50 times cheaper than Claude.
Wow.
50 per million tokens, right? So it is significant differences, right? So you're looking at you're building an app or you're building some sort of agent, on one case, it's going to cost you $20 per run, and then the other one is going to cost you 20 cents, 40 cents. So,
yeah, it's interesting. Claude was just yesterday.
Claude was yesterday. Claude 3.7, and then now everybody's reasoning models and thinking, etc. Right? So I think what everybody's jumping on, right? It's interesting. The 3.7 means something here.
Yeah.
Right? It's not random.
What does it mean?
Because we were Claude 2, Claude 3, 3.5, 3.7. So are we is this an asymptote towards 4? So are we going to have 3.9, 3.95, 3.99, 3.999? Or what's going to happen here, right? And I think...
Do you remember the iPhone?
Yeah. Imagine there's an iPhone 15.425 repeating, and it's a bit weird, but I think I know what's happening under the hood, which is they're training Claude 4, but everybody else jumped on the release cycle, and so they're let's get what we've got now, release it at 3.7, and we'll do 4 when it's ready.
This is market pressures.
Yeah. It's basically everybody, and this is the problem, right? Foundation models are a commodity now, right? So anybody who's building something based on an LLM as an agent, they can just switch the model in the back whenever they want. And that means that if someone releases, if Google releases Gemini 2.0, Gemini Flash 2.0 with reasoning, it's a mouthful, then you flip a lever and you change within 5 minutes. Like literally, like all these companies are basically saying like seeing overnight their traffic drops because it goes to a different API. And let's not forget that like the way that these companies make money is not the subscription, it's the API.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like 90% of the revenue comes from that. So it is an arms race.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's a race to the bottom. Good for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always good for the consumer when you have this sort of thing. It's crazy how quickly it went from deep innovation, moat-driven market to a saturated market, right? This is what SIM cards look like, right? What phone contracts look like, right? I can switch, and I am going to switch from Vodafone to something else because it's terrible, but like, and you know, other providers are available, but like it's easy, right? I text a number, I get a code, I put it in over there, and like, oh, switched. I don't even need the physical SIM anymore, and like we're kind of at that point with LLM APIs. Because all the libraries that have been built to support all the different APIs and all the different standards, because everybody builds everything. So yeah, it's.
And what's your take on this sort of taking an open source model and hosting it on your own server and fine-tuning it for some specific use case? Where does that sit within all of this noise?
Even if you want to do that, you don't need to. In fact, again, in the news in the last 2 weeks, Together AI just raised 305 million, which is a weird number. But that's exactly what they do, right? They have a hosting platform. You can either use any of the open source models, so they have API hosting even for DeepSeek.
Mm-hmm.
And you can then fine tune your own model with your own training set using Together. And it's like literally like one command line call. You don't have to write any code.
Together.ai, is that?
Together.ai, yeah. And basically like their model is they're just going to make money off you using GPUs, and they charge you a little bit more, and there's like the convenience of you have to do zero work to make it work. And you don't have to host your model, you don't have to do any of that.
Okay. So that's great for those listening in that are thinking about doing that now, because now they know where to go.
But again, you know what it means? Like it's extremely competitive. Like for any idea that you have that you want to build, there's at least another 5,000 people that are thinking about the same exact idea, and probably 10,000 that are thinking about a similar idea.
So, you know, you were at EF, Entrepreneur First, and you're an entrepreneur. And it's seemingly getting easier, but more saturated and more difficult to stand out in this AI world. For those people that are thinking, whether they're product professionals or other, of going and creating their own product using AI, what advice would you give them in today's climate? Because, and maybe it's not a product to go to market with. Maybe it's internal. Maybe someone's sitting in the PMO or in engineering or somewhere in project delivery, and they're going, I know a little bit about how to do this stuff, and I want to do something on my project to create something, better outcomes, whatever, whether it's health and safety, whether it's about site progress, whether it's, you know, engineering design, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's all kind of built off the same tech, one would imagine.
Probably.
How
or similar tech.
Yeah. How would you wade through all of this?
So I think the advice that I would give is very similar to the advice that I give to founders on a regular basis. And that, for me, actually hasn't changed, which is don't quit your day job until you know how you're going to make money.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what you do. You need to know how you're going to make money with it. It doesn't have to be making money now, right? But like, you need to know how you're going to make money with it. And you need to have some form of evidence that that hypothesis works.
Okay.
Right? And sure, if you want to work on it full time, you can still quit your job. Depends on like how much of your savings you want to put at risk.
Mm-hmm.
But until you figured that out, it's not a business.
Okay.
Right? And on top of that, I'll say like, yeah, it's extremely competitive. And sadly, this time I don't have evidence of it. But I had a very enlightening Nando's dinner, which I keep referring back to with my head of research. When was this? This is like, I want to say February 2023. And we went out for dinner and we started talking about like, what does this mean? Right. And we like internally, we were already building a reasoning loop into Barry.
Yep.
Which has been there forever. And it's like a different thing to what reasoning loops look like in LLMs today, but it was an early preliminary version of that kind of thing. But we had this dinner, and like one of the things that we talked about was we're going to start seeing a lot of one-person companies. I think we talked about this before, right? We're going to see like a lot of one-person companies.
But when we did talk about it before, it was probably a bit more far-fetched.
Yeah, it was, right? Like this is now happening. But even then, like, I think like 6 months later, this is where like I have no claim because I can't provide evidence other than like if I bring Vahan out and I get him to like be a witness to what we said at that dinner. But Sam Altman came out and said like, you're going to start seeing a lot of one person. I think he said one person $100 million revenue companies.
Wow.
We at the dinner said one person $1 billion valuation companies. In fact, I think we definitely said on the podcast before because I'm having flashbacks, right? Where we're going to start seeing, and if the legal framework allows for it, we might actually start seeing 0-person companies, right?
You have said that, yeah.
And the problem is, if you think about how many people there are, everybody wants to go and build a 1-person company. None of them are going to make money.
Well, I was going to ask you if.
Right. So like it becomes even more important.
Yeah. So let's say that is real and true, and that's happening right now. What problems and challenges does that create for us?
With like a ton of 1-person companies.
Yeah.
The world becomes Instagram. And let me explain what I mean by that, right? Instagram is full of single person entrepreneurs, one-entrepreneurs, whatever, right? People that like post 50 posts a day of their outfit, whatever.
Do you know where I can up my followers?
Yeah, I do. But that's a different story. But it also is related to LLMs, I guess, in a sense, right? Because you shouldn't because you're going to get kicked off, but you can buy followers. Like, digression aside, we're going to just see a lot of 1-person teams, companies. And if you think about Instagram, like why I said Instagram is because you have, your top thought leaders and influencers, whatever you want to call them, who actually do make good money and have good following. But for every one of them, you have 20,000 of them that struggle and make no money and get nothing out of it and are effectively wasting their time and opportunity on it because they're not going to get that. And that's like kind of like also natural in a sense, right? That's part of the selection mechanism of the market. So that won't go away. And we're going to start seeing that happening in all types of businesses, not just influencing. Which in a sense, like it worries me because if 1 out of 20,000 people is successful and then 19,999 struggle, you've all of a sudden created, a lot of people that struggle. So how do you socially fix that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know this is futurescaping, so we don't actually have the answers, right? This is our opinions and our views on how things are going to happen. If I think about it, I think one of the things that I've been thinking a lot lately, and those that do have me on LinkedIn will see I've started sharing my thoughts again openly, and
yeah, that's been inspiring to watch.
I think we're definitely heading into a social crisis, if I want to label it that way, where we're forgetting about the human side with all of the AI talk that's happening, where people are beginning to understand or not understand. I think it's not just threatening people's jobs necessarily, because that's been the main aspect, but how does this weave into communities and societies? Because it will. Let's face it, it already has. Anyone that's got a smartwatch, smartphone, an Alexa at home, it's already there. If you've got a smart thermostat, all these things now start coming together.
Yeah.
And so we know that due to social media, people are more lonely than ever, even though they're more connected, inverted commas, than ever, right?
Yeah.
Because people sit at home on their iPad or phone or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there's no human connection. And so I feel like there needs to be a human element to technology, not just AI, as it's coming in. So my brain's going with this is, if we have one-person companies that spring up all over the show and do extremely well.
Well, some will do extremely well, right?
Yeah.
Like, most of them won't.
Sure.
And that's kind of like the social problem is that most of them won't.
Yeah. Those that don't and won't, and if we have, let's say today, large companies do well, or large revenue companies, profitable companies do well, but they have large teams and communities of people globally, right? People.
Yeah.
Now, if we're saying that there's one-person companies that are going to do extremely well globally, but then they're a one-person company, where does that leave everyone else, right? And so...
Yeah, it's true. It's true, right? Like, where does everybody leave? Where does that leave everybody else? I think there's still going to be an enormous amount of available jobs and a lot of new jobs, right? And like, I'm not even going to go into the Apple announcement because like there's a lot of like politics in that. Forget about that for a second. But, there's going to be a lot of roles. But I think what we're seeing now, which I hope people come down on, is everybody wants to be the person that started the one-person company, which means that people are going to start leaving jobs. And there might actually end up being like a paradox of labor shortage and entrepreneur oversupply.
Okay. Yep.
Right.
I see that.
I think that's I think the social problem that's going to build out is something like this. And it's a bit far-fetched, right? Because like everything about what does AI look like in more than 5 days is far-fetched anyway. But that worries me because like, a lot of these people that take this enormous risk get into it without realizing the amount of risk that they're taking, right? Like, personal experience, I'm 7.5 years in, right? I have used up all my savings, right? And I still don't make the salary that I used to make 8 years ago. Not even half, right? So
that's the side that people don't see about entrepreneurs.
No, right? It's like I get to come here and talk about being on a podcast about AI, but like my personal finances as a result of founding Empire are completely destroyed.
But you put your heart in,
right? I put my heart in it. I put
some
equity, and like, sure, like, if Emplan gets to be $1 billion company, then I do well out of it, right? But like, I bought a very, very expensive option, effectively.
But to your point being, though, there is a risk, a huge risk that people don't. They think it's easy.
Yeah, right? and actually, like what all the agents, especially like the coding agents, you think like we talked about Devin, but like. I showed you Sintra earlier, a couple of minutes ago. They give you the perception that now it's less risky just because building is easy, and we just forget that the only thing that matters is that you need to be providing something that people want to pay for.
Yep.
And that's the only thing that matters.
You're right. It comes back to just simple economics, demand and supply, right?
Yeah.
Is there demand in the market for it?
Like Alan's stupid business advice 101, just have something that people want to pay for. If you can't figure that out, it doesn't matter how many agents you have that build stuff, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important we talk about this on this podcast because, like I say, if we're heading to a world where we do have these sort of, single person businesses, does that mean, people start paying less attention to how to be a good leader, how to listen properly because, I don't need it anymore, that kind of a thing. And, what does that do? How does that impact society? Well,
I mean, like, people are going to focus less on how to be a good leader, but that really doesn't change in the sense that they're still not doing it now.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And in fact, like, the whole point about leadership is that it's one in a few, not everybody.
Yeah. Well, I actually saw,
And that's actually back to the Instagram problem. Like everybody in Instagram's trying to be a leader. I'm just like,
yeah, go out and be a leader if you want to be a leader. Don't talk about it on Instagram. Interestingly, so have you seen that there's this video of this dude that sort of dances on his own and then one by one, like,
oh yeah, I've seen it.
and there was a TED talk around this someone gave, and goes, well, most sort of how to garner engagement is it starts with a lone nut.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the most important person isn't actually that lone nut, because he or she could dance on their own. It's the first follower.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is amazing. How to be a good leader, you need to be an amazing follower.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway.
It's actually something that it's something that you find in most of the startup product world kind of thought leadership, which is, you know, if you think about Crossing the Chasm and all these books and you know, others are available as usual. We're not sponsored by any of these things.
If you want to sponsor us,
absolutely. My routing number will appear here.
We accept Bitcoin.
Accept anything. If you want to pay us in cheese, I'll take it. But I think I lost my train of thought now.
Was it generally around leadership?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So we have the curve of adoption, right? And so like the most important thing for adoption is getting they're called early adopters, right? So I'm repeating the word a little bit, but the early adopters are the ones that really take a risk on your product, right? They take a risk on your offering. I mean product very loosely here. And even if it doesn't work well, even if it's not solving all of their problems, they're enthusiastic about the idea and the solution, right? And those are the first person to dance with you, right?
Yeah.
Because that creates social proof, social validation. That's how humans think. And yeah, like a lot of like Y Combinator talks a lot about this. Like, don't have 100 people that are okay with what you're doing. Have one that really, really, really loves you.
Yeah. And
then build more of those.
Yeah.
Right. At least for the early stage. Then when you reach scale, right, at some point, you know, when you scale up, but that we're talking about like very, very low percentages, right? It's like if 1 in 10 makes it out of the gate, 1 in 10 makes it to a seed stage, 1 in 10 gets a little bit of a following, 1 in 10 gets to growth, you know, you're actually talking about like 1 in 10,000 now. So when you get to that point, then you start catering to the masses, right?
Yeah. So similar theme to the one-person company. Do you think we'll ever get to one-person governments?
Personally, I want to see 0-person governments everywhere. And that is my personal opinion. Doesn't reflect anything that was spoken about on the podcast, and they all might or might not disagree. But also, because also that means 0 taxes and, you know, each for their own
and chaos.
Yes. And I will embrace that chaos.
So my personal view is centered. I think we need technology and people and a blend, and I don't know what that blend is, but let me go on the opposite just for discussion, debate purposes.
Okay.
So I'll go, I think we do need people driving everything we do. Yes, there have been mistakes quite recently for a lot of governments, and we haven't had true leaders in a while. Maybe the past 10, 15, 20 odd years, we haven't seen real leaders. That has transcended into organizations where we don't see true leadership as well in many organizations. And so to the point of leadership, we don't have that. But those people exist. We need to make being in government more attractive, because it's better and easier and more rewarding to be an entrepreneur than in government. So how do we change that so we get the right people leading in government, leading countries, using technology?
Okay. I'm going to be my usual unhinged self here.
Yeah.
And I'm going to quote Rick and Morty back to you.
Okay.
Filtering out some of the swearing. But, and I love this because like, it's actually something that stuck in my head for no comprehensible reason. But there's an episode of Rick and Morty where the president somehow has revived a spider version of FDR.
Okay.
it serves it's some sort of plot device, right? But like FDR is a giant spider. And he says, like, I was iconic as a president. And current president replies and says, well, I dare you to try and lead and stand out in the era of Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the thing, right? Like, we've converged everything towards the median being possibly the extreme right in some cases, but and so how do you even stand out in leadership where everybody thinks they're a leader, wants to be a leader, has an opinion, has a voice, and you're literally like struggling to get traction in that world, right? So what do you do in that case? And I think the problem is that then you're concentrating all your energy on getting following rather than leading.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two different things, right? So like leading a country, for example, you have to make decisions about things.
Yes. And we live in a complex world.
You can say that.
Okay. So my counter to that is we can use technology, but we still need people to make decisions. We can look at reforming, using that word, reforming the way governments, how long their terms are and what their outputs are. But we still need people at the heart of it to lead communities and organizations. We can look at localizing things.
Yeah.
But we still need people.
Yes. I mean, I do want to concede
the fundamental reason of why we need people is because masses won't let computers and AI lead them.
Yes, if you're talking about consent to it, right? And I agree, right? But I'm more arguing for just complete anarchy, right? Just don't have anyone leading. Forget the AI or anything else. I just don't have anything and no taxes, and I'll just retire to like some barricaded ranch somewhere in the middle of the desert and I'll be happy. But that's my personal view here. And I think rationally what you're saying is correct, right? People won't let machines lead them for the most part. And I think that is right. And there'll be, everybody's talking about efficiency, and that's basically what this is going to drive, is going to be efficiency, right? And so the amount of things that one person can do will be more, but also we'll just do more things. We won't have less people. Is like my cynical point of view.
Here's the thing. Would you be up for registering yourself for the next election, whether it's local or other, and just saying you're one person, an independent, but you're going to have AI do all of the other stuff for you and see how many people vote, and like your this is a social experiment?
I love this. So there are some things that I need to check. One of them is investment agreements, right? Am I going to get in trouble for trying to get elected to the local council with some of our investors? Probably not. It's probably fine, but... And the other one is, do I really have time to do this kind of thing?
Well, you won't need time. AI is going to do all of it for you.
Well, but then you have to turn up to the council meetings and have
though. You can just send your AI agent.
Well, no, that's the thing you can't do, right? Because like you need to be there, and because it's your name, then you have to do it. There's like very clear boundaries around it. But like, I love the thought experiment, and I would absolutely love to do it and just have AI run the entire campaign.
Yeah.
And see where I get.
Yeah. Anyway, so back to it.
No, I love it. I'm going to think about how I'm going to be able to do this, and I'll come back. I don't know when the next local election is near me. There's just been one for a seat that I don't know. I think there's a by-election, basically, was what I'm saying.
If that, for some reason, won, that's a huge signal, right?
So, but the thing is, like, you were talking about people wouldn't let AIs lead them, right? Like, and I think "let" is the important word here because it talks about consent.
Yes.
Right? Because like we know already that people are being led by AIs all over the place.
Yeah.
And by, like Cambridge Analytica.
Well, you just have lots of T's and C's that people don't want to read. They go, agree.
Also that, right? But like Cambridge Analytica and like manipulation and
Yeah.
all of that, right? So in a sense, we know that you can win an election with AI in some form or the other if you control the messaging, right? But like that's always been true as well. It's just that.
So sticking with governments,
Let's go.
what are your thoughts on Doge and what Elon's trying to do? Is it Doge? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, because
DOGE for those.
Yeah, because it's the reference to the Doge meme,
Yeah.
right? And I love, there's like a whole saga full of YouTube videos of the story of Doge and Cheems and the Swole Doge and all that. It's like fascinating underground thing, which is like now 10 years old, 15 years old.
Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah. It's shoehorned so it would be Doge, right? And like as a result, Dogecoin, which is Elon sponsored crypto sort of thing, took off.
Yep,
obviously. Look, I think efficiency in government is a problem.
Yep.
I mean, I was born and grew up in Italy. I know everything about basically like 50% of government employees just are there because it's a job that you're not going to get fired from.
Yep.
And they just kind of
Hey, I was born and grew up in South Africa. I know about.
So you know about this as well, right? Like,
yeah.
So there's an argument for that. Like, is it being done the right way? History books will tell. I honestly don't know, and it's very hard to have an opinion, especially as an external observer. Right? So like, I know it's a cop-out, but is that level of interference into every government agency going to destroy the function of those agencies, right?
Yeah.
And then we can get into like conflict of interests, right? Especially with FAA type stuff, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole barrel of worms over here that I'm going to steer clear of.
Ethical, moral, all these various angles to look at it. Conflict. I think if we are to draw positive out of it, that this is definitely an interesting experiment, if we can look at it through that lens, because it's always attributed to Einstein, this. If we do the same thing over and over, we'll get the same results.
Mm-hmm.
Here, under the Trump administration, they're trying to do something completely different.
Yeah, but also shooting yourself in the foot is different. So like you have to be different with the direction, right? So like, we'll see, right? We'll see is the only thing that I'm going to say. There are things that I agree with, things that I don't agree with, and it's, incredibly complicated, right?
Yeah.
The thing I'm glad about is that it's not an experiment that's being done on my skin.
Yeah, exactly.
So we should sit back and watch. If, as a result, the US is able to lower the federal taxes to the lowest it's ever been, well, at one point it was 0%, so it won't be that. But
yeah.
And then I'll be happy, and I might even change residency because there
you go. Well, in terms of changing residency and locations, etc., am I right in saying you, as in plan, you allow your staff to work anywhere?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So what's your take on JP Morgan wanting everyone to be 5 days a week in the office, a la pre-COVID? Do you think that is the right thing, the wrong thing? Is it hybrid? Because although we've had these conversations before, it's still a talking point. Doesn't depend.
We could just also force everyone to wear a suit every day and suspenders and show up in a bowler hat with an umbrella, right? And speak in formal English.
Did you want to do a cowboy hat? Cowboy boots?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying like JP Morgan could do that, right? And like we could pretend it's the 40s again, but it isn't. Right? It's almost the 2040s. So like what's going to happen is that there's only a certain type of person that's going to want to work there.
And do you think maybe that's the point of what they're trying to do, is get a certain type of person? I don't know, because I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I think it is also a little bit self-defeating if you think about like how that strongly correlates with the overpaid underperformer, but sure.
Yeah, probably a rabbit hole.
Right? Like there's a rabbit hole here, which is like shaped like people who take a 3-hour lunch and come back in the afternoon drunk, right? And that has been finance for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's the image that most people have if you talk about like, oh, Wall Street, city,
yeah,
right? And everybody in finance has worked so hard to get away from that.
Yes.
And JP Morgan is like, let's try and go back.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm reading maybe too much into it, but that's what it feels like, right?
Well, this is the podcast where we air our unfiltered views on what's happening.
Yeah. And I worked in finance. I worked at a market maker. I worked at a hedge fund. I never wore a suit on any of those days unless it was like a very particular occasion.
And does it impact your performance?
Oh, absolutely. I got paid a lot less because I didn't wear a suit. No, absolutely not. Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. If we bring that back to, I guess, the project profession, people often ask me where I stand with this. I think for me, it depends on your type of role. If you're going to go into the office and sit on a computer the whole time because your job is to design stuff on a computer, you can do that at home.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to go to site because you're building something or you're installing something and you need to be there, then go to site. If part of your job is to go to site and part of your job is to do stuff on the computer, then guess what? Hybrid working is probably the right answer.
Yeah, but also you're going to site. You're not going to an office.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And like, I think this is where I'm extremely cynical about this, right? Like RTO, this has been said before, right? A lot of people believe RTO is a cheap way of getting rid of people.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that most of the time you're going to lose the good ones who can go and get a really good job working remotely, right? So is that a smart move? Nobody knows. But if you're like the size of JP Morgan and you lose 10,000 people, there's going to be a mix and you've saved 10,000 salaries without having to pay whatever liquidation it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So cynical me says there's some of that. There's some self-selection for the type of person that you want at the organization. And then if you can do a job remotely, why should you waste your time going in, right? And that is what everybody's realizing is like, I don't need to. Yeah. So therefore I don't want to, right? So like, if you're in sales, most of your job is going to be being on calls.
Yeah.
Right? Now, is it better to do that at home in front of your computer or in an open plan office with 5, potentially 10, 20 other salespeople on their own call? Right? Then all of a sudden you've basically invented the call center, which also makes no sense anymore because you can route the calls to wherever you want because the internet was invented. So like there are really like very, very few cases where it makes sense to go to an office regularly.
Yes.
Right? There is I want to see the people that I work with. And so, but that's more event based. It's not regular, right? It'll be like, oh, let's do a team day a month or something like that. Right? And those have good benefits, but why should you? Right? Like if your job is to write code, if your job is to send emails, if your job is to get on calls, if your job is to work on documents, basically if you're typing or talking into a computer, there's no point.
Yes, right? Unless you want to do a podcast in person.
Yeah, exactly. But like that's only because I want to see your face.
No, absolutely.
And I can see your face on the computer, but
and I think it'll come across, well, hopefully it does when people are listening to this or watching it. It's far more natural for us to talk to each other like this, where we're looking at a screen and, you know, you can kind of know, well, you can kind of watch if you're careful. But if there's 2 or 3 people, if Greg was on, if Val was ever on, you know, you're then trying to see who's going to talk next, where when you're together, you can kind of go, that person wants to talk. So, but this isn't about the podcast, but I get what you're saying. It's dependent on your role, right?
Yeah.
But look, we got about 5 minutes left on this episode.
We haven't even spoken about Grok.
We haven't. Okay, go ahead.
3, right?
Well,
you tried it?
I haven't tried it. Talk about Grok because there's 2 other things I want to ask you.
Okay. Well, I don't have many opinions about Grok. There's like I did a little short about it, but the reality is that I think the conclusion that most of us have drawn is that Grok used techniques that exist and they brute forced it through volume of GPUs. Right? So they're saying they use 100,000 GPUs, and they're building another 100,000 into a cluster, and we're talking about enormous scale of training. And so what I'm actually probably excited about is what is Grok 4 going to look like, right? Because they're going to start using GRPO and reasoning and everything else and throw it into a giant model that's trained for ages in terms of GPU time. I want to see what that looks like, because that's exciting, right? Because if we get to beating O3 Mini with methods that predate O3 Mini through scale, and this is kind of what we were saying about DeepSeek, right? If we can scale up, we'll just keep going and we'll just get better models, not cheaper ones.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I'd add in, because we're talking about Elon, is it's got almost his personality when it talks back to you.
Yeah. I don't. No comment.
Which is interesting, right? Just you can just see the way it responds. The other thing, just quickly, this is probably...
I think maybe he wrote the system prompt.
Maybe did. But there's this sideways segue. I see there was an article I read yesterday where they're looking at this tunnel from New York to London, underground tunnel.
Oh, I read about that. It's
15 trillion or something like that.
Yeah.
I can do
stupid
that
number.
for 1,000 times less. That's what he said.
How do you estimate the cost of something like that, right?
Yeah.
And, talking to a project controls professional, how do you estimate the cost of something like that?
Yeah, you don't, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
Because at that point, you call it a program, like you did with the space shuttle, like you did with the Apollo program, and you say we'll just keep putting money into it at this rate until it's finished.
Yep.
But you don't really know.
You don't. Because you don't know what you're going to find. Risk management. Do you have any schedules?
No, right? Of underwater tunnels for 5,000 miles, how many times is it going to implode while you're building it?
Yeah.
Right? And let's not even go to underwater implosions, but it is out of sample, right? In machine learning, we call it out of sample. We don't have a reference, right? And for those listening who love reference class forecasting, I dare you to create a reference class for this.
But it's easy. You just take other tunnels and you just...
Yeah, sure.
You just multiply it by the distance.
Yeah.
No?
No, right? We all know that the answer to that is no, right? But that's kind of the thing but we do need those things to get done. Maybe not necessarily a tunnel from London to New York, right? Because
in 54 minutes.
In 54 minutes. Okay, so the Concorde did it in what, 3 hours?
Yeah.
Right?
Something like that, yeah.
And it got retired because, Skype killed it, right? Because it was Skype era. So even back then, right? So you need it. I'm going to go back to my advice to startups. Do you have something that people want to buy?
Yeah.
So how much is the ticket going to be? Who's going to want to get on it?
Yeah. Those are the thoughts that went through my head.
Because also, that's terrifying to me.
Yes.
Right? I'll get in a Hyperloop, but
I think it was something
not one on 5 miles under the sea or something.
Yeah, was it 4,000 miles per hour or something like that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, which is scary. Anyway, the two things, if we have time for it, was one was we spoke about before when Google did it, but Microsoft just released their quantum chip. Quantum computing is now a thing in the news again.
It will be for a while. Get it solved. Right?
Is this another step towards getting us there?
I mean, it's definitely another step.
I like the name, Marijuana One.
Yeah. I thought about that as well, right?
Majorana.
Yeah. I mean, it's a step, for sure. It's a step forward. How many steps are left before we can do things, right? And it's getting close. I think it's, still... I'm going to still call it a proof of concept, right? Because I don't see many companies adopting that particular chip. There's so much other stuff that needs to happen, and it just keeps getting better and better and better, right?
So what's the key thing here? Because they talk about, is it a top conductor? That's something new. Is that the phrase they used? What's the?
Maybe we need the physicist to explain that to us.
Maybe, but yeah, he didn't turn up. But I guess in layman's terms, what is the step change here for those that aren't au fait with quantum? Can we do things faster, quicker? Is it closer to something?
So there's the step change in general introduced by quantum computing, which is this. I guess it kind of even relates to simulation.
Okay.
So hear me out. I'm going to go on like a quick detour. But if you think about, I mean, virtually anything, right? But if we think about programs, right? And memory, in a sense, memory has a state. It's either 0 or 1.
Yes.
Right? But then we look at programs, and programs, especially in simulation, that kind of thing. Like if we think about, where a lot of us use Monte Carlo tools, that kind of thing. You're exploring one case at a time.
Yes.
But the thing that you're able to do with quantum computing is use superimposition, where particles can be in both states at the same time to explore 2 states at once. So a qubit can be 0 and 1 at the same time, and you chain that together, and you get a result where you've covered the entire state space, right? So if you think about the state space for 4 regular bits is 2 to the 4, right? So you've got 16 possible options.
Yep.
And so if you want to explore that state space, you need to run through 16 cases. And that is 16 units of computation for whatever thing you're going to do. If you use quantum computing to do that, you do it once and you have 16 outputs.
Okay. Based
on the different states of the bits, of the qubits. And I think that's the step change, and that's why everybody's terrified about quantum computing and encryption, and security, because encryption is based effectively on, or most modern encryption, there is quantum safe encryption, which is starting to come up, which is great. But traditional encryption is based on the notion of it's going to take you longer than the age of the universe to brute force this encryption, right? And it's all based on having some sort of secret that only the receiver has.
Yep.
Right? So with that, then quantum computing introduces a risk, because you're no longer talking about the age longer than the age of the universe to compute the thing. You're talking about 1 step, however long that may take. And I think we're miles away from that, because I don't know the details about Microsoft's chip right now off the top of my head, but we're still talking about like a handful of qubits, right? And you can't do a lot with that, but it's another step.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about the chip, like forget top conductors and this notion that they invented a new state of matter. It's not like that state of matter theoretically existed. They just managed to produce it physically and fit it into a chip, but which is actually, still a good achievement. Nothing to detract from that. But the cool thing is that they've proven that you can actually downsize a qubit by a lot, right?
Okay.
So, and a lot of it is about density, right? Like, 10 years ago, 1 qubit would take up half a room.
Well, we go back, computers used to take our entire room.
Yeah, and it's again like density computation, right? So like, how fast are we going to increase that density, right? Because like, at least theoretically, a qubit could take the space of 1 particle. It won't. It never will, right? Because you need stuff around it. But
yeah, interesting stuff. So watch the space. And then finally, I think folks loved your rant session when DeepSeek came out.
Oh my.
What's bugging you currently? What's the one thing that's on your mind? Is this like the L rant minutes or something that we can introduce?
Oh, can we have like a little soundtrack for it? Like Al's rants. What frustrates me lately? I think I'm still like got echoes of frustration about not so much just the DeepSeek misinformation, but this everybody's now gunning to find a reason to say that NVIDIA's dead.
Okay.
Right? And that we don't need GPUs. And I mean, first of all, who cares? Right?
Investors.
Yeah, well, yes, but right, there'll be another thing, right? And then there's the oh no.
Go on.
There's actually, you've heard me rant about this probably on the podcast before, but there's this whole current that is still going on, and I can't get over this, which is I'm gonna try AI once, and I'm gonna give it a trick question, right? And then, because it didn't do what I expected it to do on my trick question, I'm going to use that as evidence that all AI is useless, right?
Yep.
And yeah, there's
so
a lot of LinkedIn.
I don't know if you've done this one. So just recently, I found out if you ask any of the models out there to generate you an image of a wine glass that is full to the brim, it doesn't work. It doesn't get you there, and so therefore it must be shit. But actually, no, it generated a picture for you.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing, right? Like, that doesn't mean that all image generation is broken.
Yeah.
Right.
It does a full point.
In fact, I think like if you're still following that thread, there's someone actually did manage to do it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know what prompt they used. I can't remember. It was something along the lines of a wine glass full of red beer.
Ah, okay.
Right. And like beer is usually full to the brim, wine is usually halfway up.
Yeah.
And so, and really what that means is that, and we know this, especially diffusion models do not have an internal world model that is fully comprehensive, right? And diffusion models can generate things that they've seen, and there's probably no pictures of a glass of wine full to the brim in any training set. So it doesn't know what that looks like, so it can't generate a similar one for you, right? And so if you want to generate a train, but it's different colors and it's going through the countryside, and ironically, you can do a lot of stuff, right? You can say, I want the trees to be blue, which is not something that we see. That'll happen, right? So like there's a good amount of world model in, but it's not a fully comprehensive world model, right?
If you do want a full glass of wine to the brim, if you come down to my rugby club,
I'm in.
We usually do that, but if you don't say stop and it gets to the
brim,
then you have to down it. So it's part of the rules. Anyway,
I'll take a picture.
I'll take
a picture of it first, and then we'll put it in the training model. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. I love the way we ended this pod. Folks, look, it's been awesome to be with you.
As always.
Yeah, as always. These are unscripted, so we don't know what we discuss on every single episode. So if you think that there is something that you would like us to chat about, any specific topic, please do send them in. We'd love the engagement. Reach out to Al directly. He's becoming a massive star now on his own social media as well, doing your monologues.
Yeah, absolutely. I needed more outlets to rant.
But no, please do give us feedback. Let us know how you're enjoying it, or if you're not as well, because we do this out of the kindness of our hearts, and it's a bit of a therapy.
Hey, if anybody wants to send in questions, we could do a section where we will read a question.
Yeah. If we manage to do a regular live slot, when I say live, in person, myself, you and Greg, and it's at a reasonable hour, then we could actually go live onto LinkedIn and YouTube like we tried to before, and get those.
Twitch.
Yeah, Twitch. I've never used.
Yeah.
So we'll have to get the AI agent.
Probably not the age range that we're aiming for, but.
But look, folks, thank you so much for spending the time with us. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.